Radar Update. My name is Daniel Vallis, and welcome to our channel. Thank you so much for those who have prayed for me in this ministry. I greatly appreciate it, and I greatly need it. I get tired and weary just like everybody else, and this has certainly been a very tiring and exhausting trip and journey, but we've learned so much. And the enemy is very busy too as well. There is a spiritual battle going on. So I need your prayers for spiritual strength and physical strength and mental strength and wisdom too as well. And again, I greatly appreciate your prayers. It makes a world of difference. When we look on our event study calendar, we are on the 11th and 12th right now of November, at a very important time, also at the limits of some of our understanding. We have just reached and passed the division by the retrograde arcs by our best understanding, and that's what those asterisks represent and point to on that page. By our best understanding, Jupiter is now past the retrograde arc division. And we also see another important prophetic event in just a few hours ahead of us with the peace and safety that the Bible warns us about too as well. And then we also see a few hours after that, we see a reminder of the fig tree prophecy, which again points us to Scripture of how we were to look for that. And then when we see these things beginning to come to pass, then we are to look up and we are to lift up our heads, for our redemption is drawing nigh. There are multiple prophetic events coming together in just these few hours where we are right now. We're on the threshold right now. And then we also see at the end of this week, we also see another prophetic step being taken too as well. So we are at a very important time, and this is also why the enemy is also very busy at this time. There is spiritual warfare going on right now because the battle is real. The time is real. They know what time it is. When we look at a timeline view of the calendar, we can see the retrograde division, and that has been the best of our understanding, and that is what we plainly say in the shallow booklet too as well. This is the best of our understanding, that the division would be around the 11th. But that is the best of our understanding. We cannot concretely say 100% that that is it. And as we've covered before, of all the prophetic things that we've been looking at, the actual delineation of the border has been the hardest to determine. But we do know we are very, very, very close. And just like the wise men, again, we must always keep this picture in mind. This story is recorded in Scripture for our learning. We are called to be wise men. We are called to be the wise bride. And so this example is our number one example that we need to be looking at. The wise men went out so far on a long journey on what they knew. And it was an extremely exhausting journey too as well. And certainly we can relate to that. It's very exhausting. We are all tired. We are all ready to go home. We know we are close to the end. We know we are close to the King. And we have seen so much over the journey and at the beginning of the journey too as well. But one thing we have to remember with the wise men example, and one of the most profound examples and morals of the story with the wise men, is they were very close to the end, but they did not have all the information yet. They did not even realize how close they were to the end and what important information they were missing. But they went forward anyway. And when we reach the destinations that are at the limit of our understanding, then we always get there, and our next question should be, okay, what comes next? You know, when the wise men got to Jerusalem and they started asking people, where is he that is born King of the Jews? And they started getting all these strange puzzled looks by people, like, what are you talking about? And then they went to Herod the king and they asked him, where is he that is born King of the Jews? And they could tell by the look on his face that he had no idea what they were talking about either. And it's funny to read that Herod sent the wise men off to another room and he called the scribes and Pharisees to ask them privately to kind of get a briefing of, okay, what's going on here, folks? You know, where's this guy supposed to be born? But you can imagine the wise men off in a lobby somewhere talking among themselves saying, can you believe it? We came all this way and nobody knows where the king is. Are we even in the right town? Are we even on the right journey here? You know, did we just see something? Did we just see what we wanted to see? Nobody has any clue. Did you see the look on Herod's face when we asked him? He had no clue what we were talking about. This has just been a royal waste of our time. They could be thinking that. We don't know what was going through their minds, but we can imagine the frustration that they would have felt at the end of their journey when they came to the end of their understanding. They fully understood and they fully expected to find the King of the Jews, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, at his capital city, Jerusalem. But then they show up and nobody has any idea what they're talking about. It is when we reach the limit of our understanding that we don't discard what we do know, but we open ourselves to more wisdom and insight to keep going forward. As long as we have nothing that actually shows us and proves us that our journey has been incorrect, we can keep going forward with light, and God has been showing us and giving us light as we go forward. And the wise men, after they came to Jerusalem, there was a brief amount of time where they were in between their two destinations, at the limit of their understanding. They knew, though, what they had seen before. They knew what they were shown. They knew parts of the prophecy. They didn't know it all, but they knew they had seen so much. So they knew they were very close. And so they got the next bit of information that they should head to Bethlehem. And so they started to go out. And once they started to go out again, then they got more information with another celestial sign. And so this is where we are right now. We are at the best of our understanding. We have gone forward. We are still going to go forward. And that has brought us to very prophetic events. So we know we are in the right neighborhood. We know it is right around here somewhere. We also know that our understanding will never show us the day or the hour, but we are told to watch anyway. And so when we find that the best of our understanding brings us to the neighborhood, and we find ourselves within days and hours of 2 other major prophetic events, really 3 other prophetic events, that shows us, okay, we're in the right neighborhood. And we know we're at Jerusalem now. We know Bethlehem is right around here somewhere, very close by to our Jerusalem. And so while we don't know specifics yet, we do know the best of our understanding has brought us to other prophetic events that Scripture has told us to look for. And that when we do see those, that we should be looking up expecting our Redeemer and our redemption. So we can go forward at times, even when we do not have information of why we are going forward. And that brings us to the examples found in Hebrews 11, the chapter of faith, the hall of faith, where Abraham went out not even knowing where he was going. Where Noah went forward in faith and built an ark, not even knowing the destruction that would come. There are times when we are called to go forward to the best of our understanding and then take another step beyond that. We know we have been brought to a prophetic time. We know there are other things here that we are told to look at, so we know we're at the right time. And when we reach these points in our life, we have to set aside our better judgment sometimes and say, Lord, I don't have to have all the answers. I can see you have brought us to this place and that you are working. And that these other events show that you have brought us to this place. And so, Lord, I will trust you that there are things that I don't know and that you are working in my life. Lord, give me wisdom and insight for the steps that I need to take right now. And so this is where we find ourselves right now, right at a threshold, but also with other major prophetic events in just the few hours ahead. And with everything that we do see right here at this time, we do not have to have all the answers. There is research that we are doing and some leads we are following up on, but we can still go forward in faith. And especially when we see the other prophetic events right here, what we have studied, our journey has brought us to our Jerusalem. And we know Bethlehem is around here somewhere. So we will continue to go forward in faith, looking up, expecting our Redeemer, because that's what we're told to do when we see these other prophetic events. And it also certainly catches our attention that the enemy knows what time it is too. The mystery of iniquity does have more information than we do. We are called to be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves. The mystery of iniquity does have access to more knowledge and stuff in their libraries and their archives and their scientific advancements and technology that they have access to that we do not. And so we go forward on the best of our understanding. And that brings us to prophetic markers that tell us we are at the right time. And so we can rest in that we are at the right time. And we know the time. And we can also see the enemy busy too as well. And the Bible also tells us and ties in with the prophetic events that we are going to see their activity at the end when they say peace and safety. So a prophetic watchman needs to look at what prophecy says, but then also needs to be looking at the enemy, what they are doing too as well. And that's what a watchman does. They stand on the wall and they watch both sides of the wall. And we have seen so many messages that the enemy knows what time it is, and they are practically climbing the walls with excitement, knowing they're about to be unrestrained. They know the time. And they know that most of the church is asleep, and they are laughing at how the church is asleep. But they know somewhere around here is that threshold when Shiloh will gather his people. And while they may have more astronomical and celestial information that guides their activity, we have been shown enough to bring us right to this very neighborhood with other prophetic events going on right at the same time too, that we actually have more clarity about. The peace and safety mark we actually have a clearer understanding of that than the Shiloh border part of the prophecy as well. And so we always look at what is the best of our understanding. We go forward on that. When we reach an area where we do not know, we can say, okay, we've been brought to this area, and it's brought us within hours of the peace and safety mark, which we've been told to look at, and we know exactly what day that happened. And we find ourselves coming up to the year anniversary of it, and the 1 year mark, the time for preparation and purification. The 1 year warning example that's also foreshadowed in Scripture too as well with Daniel and the king. So we know that's very strong. We see that just a few hours away from the best of our understanding border. So we can rest assured that, okay, maybe we don't know exactly to the day of the border, but we find that brings us right here to something we know that is very solid. Right when we are expecting the threshold and the sudden destruction to start anyway. So we can rest in the best of our understanding and go forward on that. And remember, the enemy was allowed to make the peace and safety warning. The enemy does know a lot of prophetic events that we are not privy to. Even in the spiritual realm, the angels of darkness, they have more information than we do. Remember, the Bible even records about how the demons knew the time of their judgment. They knew when certain things were going to take place on a prophetic scale. But Jesus told his disciples that there is one thing that even the angels in heaven don't know. They do not know the day or the hour that Christ will come to gather his people. There are other things they know. They have an idea of when their time is going to be. They know the celestial events of Revelation 12. They know the schedule of judgments that are going to happen. And that's why the Bible even tells us when they get to those parts, they're very angry because they know their time is short. They know a timetable. There is a lot that they do know. They just don't know the exact day or hour that Shiloh is coming to gather his people. But they do know that they've been allowed to make the peace and safety warnings. And they also knew in advance long enough to make preparations to make those warnings. Think about that. The warnings that we saw go out last year with all the peace and safety events, they had been preparing and leading up to those events before they actually made those broadcasts. They knew the timing of when they would go out. They also knew in advance the year cycle, when it'd bring us back to here too as well. And so they have a full expectation of knowing the general time and when sudden destruction is going to come. That's going to be coming right around here any day now. And that is why they keep pushing toward this time, because they know the time. They know what even Scripture has told us to look for. And even just going by that, we know this is the time. But just like the angels in heaven, we do not know the day or the hour that Christ will come for his people. But we can find ourselves right on some important marks that we were told to watch for, and that he told us to look for, and that when we see them, that we are to look up, because our redemption is drawing nigh. And that they also signal sudden destruction is coming too. And the enemy knows that as soon as the sudden destruction is allowed, as soon as they're unrestrained, and the four horsemen of the apocalypse comes onto the scene, there's going to be a lot of destruction. When the Antichrist comes onto the scene and uproots 3 kings, there's going to be a lot of carnage and destruction, and their new order, their ruler, will emerge, their phoenix, from the ashes of the destruction that was finally allowed. And then it's just going to get worse from there too as well. But that's why we've seen this messaging of the art displays that they've been putting on in this time frame, reminding their disciples that they are expecting a rising from the ashes of their Nimrod figure to rebuild their Tower of Babel effort. That's going on right now. We've seen that in multiple messages. And they're reminding their disciples that this is the time they are expecting their son of perdition to be unrestrained. And we also talked about the art exhibit at Times Square called The Beginning of the End. At Times Square, connection with time, but the whole concept of the beginning of the end. We've talked about this before, and also in the Shiloh booklet, the concept of the ecliptic constellations, how Judah, the lion, does signal the omega portion, and how Virgo, the woman, signals the alpha portion, when this cycle starts over again. They know the lion signals the end, the woman signals the beginning. So right now, while we are at the threshold between the end and the beginning, we are at the beginning of the end. They know the prophetic picture we are at right now. They know Shiloh is about to gather his people, and then that's going to immediately go into the next picture, which for them signals when they will be unrestrained and they'll be doing many activities during a very perplexing time, and sudden destruction is going to come on the world as a woman in travail. They know the picture, once it changes, it's in their favor. This is why they're so excited, because they're waiting to be unrestrained. And they're using all these exhibits to emphasize the patterns and the parables that they are familiar with their teaching. a counterfeit of many other things, and they're using it to hem in the understanding for their disciples of when their expectation is. And right here at this threshold, they're reminding their disciples that they are at the beginning of the end. They know what time it is. And the other day we talked about how Time magazine, they put on their cover, "The end is near." And many other messaging that they're doing right at this time, because they know on the celestial clock that they are at the beginning of the end, and the end is near, the end of the lion picture. Once that picture changes, once the threshold is passed, once the beginning starts over again on the celestial clock, that's also going to signal their time, their playtime. And they are happy that the end of the ending is near. They know what time it is, that the end of Judah is near. The end of the Omega is near. It's about to switch to the beginning with the woman again. The Alice picture too as well. And so it's been several days since we've put out a video, but we've definitely noticed that messaging at the time of the Days of the Dead with the Alice and the time in the White House and then the Time magazine after that. But then we should not be surprised to see the enemy messaging still going on because they know what time it is. On the 7th of November, CERN put out a news announcement about at the beginning of everything. Right in context of the beginning of the end, and right here at the threshold of where the Omega is going to switch to the Alpha. They bring up that they are at the beginning of everything. The threshold between the end and the beginning of the end. So they put out a news post announcing their new museum exhibit, and which, by the way, is connected to the Higgs boson particle, supposedly, which goes by the moniker of the God particle. And they're using this subject to paint a picture. They know that we're at the end of the Omega portion, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and it's about to switch over to the woman, which is the beginning portion. They know we're at the threshold of the beginning, and we're at the beginning of the end. Then, of course, November 8th was the election here in the United States. In Rolling Stones, the prominent magazine, did an article titled "Party at the End of the World" inside Trump's election night bash. End of the world. And you've seen this theme a lot, where they're using this event and this timing to really push this wording that they are at the end of the world. And you see also mentions of Trumpocalypse and other related themes to that too as well. But the whole idea of the end of the world. And they're using this Trump event as a cover for the end of the world, that the end is near. They're using this as a cover, and everyone thinks it's a joke. Oh, haha, the end of the world. No, it's a deliberate messaging that, yes, they know what time it is. A trumpet of warning is going out, but most Christians think it's a joke. This entire election is a complete charade. It's complete fake. It's all staged. And a lot of Christians are getting their hopes up about it, or they're even putting their concerns aside because they think everything's under control now. No, it's all fake. It's all staged. And we've made a video about this before called "How to Take Over the World." It is so easy to control the major power movers and even the supposed checks and balances in the government. It is so easy to control that. All you need are agencies that dig up dirt full time on all of them and then just wave that around in front of them and they will do whatever you say. And you can set up honeypots and traps to make them more controllable too as well. It's so easy to control a government and still maintain the illusion of the checks and balances. All you have to do is go through the back door. The American system of government is a complete charade. It's all fake. It's going on with the illusion of control and that the different agencies are in control of their different areas, but no, it's all controlled. And it's very easy to control. And many other governments too as well. The more corrupt a government is too as well, the easier it is to control the individuals in power. Keep that in mind. And the Bible even tells us in Revelation 17 that the kings are working to hand over power to the beast. They are getting things ready, knowing full well that one day they are going to hand over power to him. They are waiting for their phoenix to arise out of the ashes. This is what they've been working for. And so everything is staged, and they all know only certain parts, and it's all working together, but it's all a charade. It's all staged. They are getting the world ready for the phoenix. Many people are familiar with the Economist cover, and we've talked about that before in the past too as well. They knew in advance that Trump was going to win the election. This was no surprise to them. The events that are unfolding with this election and even the fallout with the riots and all that, all of it is staged and all of it is controlled, and it's all part of leading and directing toward their phoenix rising up out of the ashes of what is going to happen. They knew in advance that Trump was going to be the one chosen in this part of the charade. When we take a look at the Economist cover for 2016, it should catch your attention of who is not on the cover. Trump is not on the cover anywhere. At least not visibly by the face that we recognize him by. But Trump is there. He's there in picture form. He is the sun. He is the one associated with the Apollo picture, because he's associated with Apollo, the sun god. You know, we've talked before about Trump's gilded apartment and how he has Apollo painted on his ceiling right in his living room, and also Prometheus too as well. We've talked about those Greek gods. They have Apollo with this sun chariot being pulled across the sky. Big emphasis. They had to pay someone to paint this on their ceiling. They know what it represents. And in the same living room, they also have above the fireplace another picture of Apollo in his sun chariot. This is what Trump is associated with oftentimes, a Apollo picture. He has it painted on his ceiling. He has it hanging above his fireplace. He has many other references to the Greek mythology too as well. On the living room table, and a lot of news articles about his apartment, they'll make emphasis of Muhammad Ali's tribute book, that big white box there. The greatest of all time, the GOAT. That picture and symbolism is emphasized in the apartment too as well. Apollo and the GOAT. And all this at the top of the Trump Tower, associating a Apollo, a Apollyon, a Nimrod type with a tower, Trump Tower. He lives in a tower, which pulls up the Nimrod, who built and instigated the Tower of Babel picture. And Trump, the Apollo figure, lives at the top of Trump Tower. And when you look at his crest, which is all over the place on a lot of his merchandising and different monograms, and it's at many of his golf clubs too as well and other places, it's very familiar logo with Trump. Anyone familiar in different power circles would be familiar with the Trump logo. And notice how at the top the hand is holding the spear, brandishing the spear. Again, this monogram, this logo is all over. Trump is well known for his Trump Tower, where he lives, and for brandishing the spear. So when we look back at the cover and we have that in mind of what the different power circles associate with Trump, the Apollo figure, the interest in Greek mythology, the hand holding the spear, Trump Tower, Apollo the sun god. Trump is on the cover. He's there, hidden though, in parable form. The others are there for distraction. And when we look at expanded graphics that went with the cover, again, Trump is not pictured with the people, but Trump is pictured through parable form. Notice the significant tower that is right in the middle that draws your attention to it. The tower. And notice the sun, the Apollo picture. What is he looking at? He's looking at the tower. They're connecting the two. The Apollo, the sun, with the tower. And who is at the top of the tower? Someone brandishing and holding a spear. It's a picture reference to Trump and Trump Tower. Apollo, the Nimrod figure. They knew full well who was going to represent the Nimrod figure. And of course he was always emphasizing it himself. He knows it's all staged. And he was always messaging who controls him, who he works for, the agenda that's going on. And he was constantly emphasizing, to leave no doubt to his handlers and to their other disciples who knew the messaging, of who was in control. It's all staged. He's constantly flashing the 666. Very deliberate gesture, especially if you've ever taken professional public speaking. You know the importance of gestures, especially ones done with your non-dominant hand. But Trump was emphasizing who he was connected with, who was controlling him. And remember, he went to a Jesuit University of New York for 2 years. And then he went to another university which was a little bit more covertly controlled. But the first 2 years, he went to a university that was blatantly Jesuit. And so when he's messaging to people, he's not just making some enthusiastic gesture or just something for fun. No, he knows full well what he's messaging. He's been trained to make that message. He knows the context of it. He knows what it means, and he knows who is pulling his strings and who is putting him in places and who the power brokers are. And he's always emphasizing that. So their disciples don't get caught up in the hoopla, always reminding them there is a schedule, there is an agenda, there is a charade. It's all staged. He has Jesuit education. He is a Jesuit, just like the Pope, who also made the same signals at Congress to other of their ilk there at Congress too as well, letting them know different emphasis of the agenda. And of course, Trump went to a Jesuit dinner, very prominent. They made no bones about this. And people just excuse it or gloss it over, thinking, oh, well, maybe he's not connected to them at all. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. It's all staged. These power brokers run in very tight circles. They can pretend to be enemies out on the public front, but they run very close in circles. And it's no secret who controls them: the Catholic Church, particularly the Jesuits. And even at this very high-profile dinner with other very notable power brokers right there, Trump plainly stated in the speech that he had known these people for quite a while, ever since his younger days. Yes, he's been coming to this Jesuit dinner for a long time, a long time. He said in his speech, "We will see what happens, but I have great memories of coming to this dinner with my father over the years when I was a young man. Great experience for me. This was always a special experience for him and me to be together." He started coming to these Jesuit dinners when he was a young man. He's not a young man anymore. He's been coming to these power circles for a long time. And they know it's a royal joke on the public because it is all staged, and they know that. They know the patterns and shadows of the parables that they project with their messaging. They are getting the world ready for a Nimrod figure. Trump is not the Antichrist, but he's definitely paving the way for it. There's going to be many Antichrists that pave the way for the Antichrist. And they're using Trump to sucker punch the Christians in America and making them think everything's okay and that they can put their guard down. No, now is the time when we need to be sober, we need to be vigilant, and we need to be awake and getting ready. This sexual predator is duping Christians left and right. He's been involved in many perversions for a long, long time. And even on the campaign trail, you'd see him autographing copies of Playboy magazine that he was featured on the cover of for different people who had asked him to. You don't get invited to be on the cover of Playboy unless you have already sold your soul and your morals a long time ago. And of course, even recently, invited went to the Playboy anniversary too as well. Trump is a dirty old man who has a lot of secrets and makes himself easily controllable. He has access to power circles and money, and that makes him controllable too as well. It's all staged. It's all staged. It's a complete charade to fool the world. To prepare the world for the phoenix who will rise up out of the ashes, the Nimrod figure. And they know this is about to happen. And that there are political steps and social engineering events that are going to happen, particularly in this country too as well, that are going to serve as a springboard for the real Nimrod type to come onto the scene, the real Antichrist, which is really going to usher in their new Babylon effort, their new Tower of Babel effort. And on the night of the election, they projected Trump's picture and brought a lot of focus to the Empire State Building. And it was a massive projection effort onto the Empire State Building and got a lot of people's attention and projected a scene very reminiscent of The Apprentice. And that's what he is. He is an apprentice. He's just a puppet. It's all staged. It's all a charade. But there are a lot of news articles talking about the projection onto the Empire State Building and making a tie-in to last year's projection, which was the last time a major projection onto the Empire State Building was done of that scale. And so they're making a lot of connections to Cecil the Lion and that event, which was also when they showed Kali, the goddess connected with time and death and destruction, very similar to Shiva too as well. And so they're bringing up all these patterns to the surface again now at this time in connection with the Nimrod figure and the Apollo figure, their lion, and they know that sudden destruction is about to come. They know what time it is. They know that the destruction is coming, and they're looking forward to it because that means their phoenix will rise out of the destruction. They will be able to build their Tower of Babel on the ashes of the old world. And this is what they're looking for. They are looking forward to the end of the world, and they're using all this staged charade as a cover for the true messaging of what time it is. End of the world. Even messaging in international magazines too as well, the end of the world as we know it. That's what it says in German. Of course, time, the end is near. They're emphasizing it in major media publications of what time it is, what the celestial clock is, what the prophetic time is, and that they're looking forward to it. Because it means that they are about to be unrestrained. And they begin their disciples building up and using this built up of emotions, especially the emotional turmoil at this time with the election. And it's amazing to see this spill over across the world. But using this angst and this built up, pent up emotion, they're feeding on that, especially during the spiritual time. The days that follow, the days of the dead, those are very occult days too as well. We are in a very occult time right now, a very dark time. And we talked about how on Halloween they used the venue of the White House, that high-level office, to promote and push the Alice theme and the time and the White Rabbit. So then it shouldn't surprise us that CERN again put another news notice out on November 10th concerning Alice. Lead, ion, and proton, close encounters of the third kind. And it's all about the Alice experiment and how they ramped that back up and started it again right at this time, emphasizing Alice again. But then also notice the odd wording that they use, the close encounters of the third kind, which of course is a reference to a famous movie about aliens and alien encounters. So CERN, which is related to the god of the underworld, Cernunnos, just a few days after Halloween, which relates to the Days of the Dead and Cernunnos, which also focused on Alice going to the underground, going to the underworld. Both of these mirror messages. They know we're at a very important time. They know what time it is. They know the prophetic events that they were even part of, the different historic markers that the Bible warns about. They know they have transpired. They know the warning has gone out. They know what comes next, sudden destruction. And they know the timetable, and they know the threshold. And they're getting ready for the end of the world. So keep in mind the connection with the encounters of the third kind, and then keep in mind that today, on the 11th of the 11th month, is also when the Arrival movie comes out. All about aliens arriving and trying to communicate with mankind. And that is the main thrust of this movie, of the main actress in this movie Arrival trying to communicate and understand these aliens, which is the exact same theme in Encounters of the Third Kind too as well, where they try to communicate with the other beings. Very suspicious timing that both these events come out back to back, because they know what time it is. They know there's about to be a great alien deception. And it appears that it's going to be launched as soon as Shiloh gathers his people, and they are unrestrained, and it appears the great deception is going to involve aliens to a large degree as part of the deception. And I strongly suspect it's going to be part of the story of the destruction that also comes onto the scene too as well, the sudden destruction. Now, when we look at the Peace and Safety Announced handout, and we look at the timeline of the high-level messages that went out just after November 13th, we can see that on the 18th was the Pepsi Peace short film Black Knight Decoded, which came out on November 18th. Using thousands of people in 11 different countries, along with notables such as Usher and NASA, Pepsi produced a short film promoting peace all over the world and the world uniting as one, in context of an alien coming onto the scene. We talked about it quite a bit when it first came out, but the huge message for peace, and that this was no small production. Again, this used thousands of people, had major singers such as Usher involved and NASA involved too as well. This was a very high-level message, very blatantly about peace, just a few days after the Paris attacks too as well. And the main crux of this messaging was about trying to understand a message that was sent by aliens. They were trying to decipher and understand the language, which resonates exactly with the Arrival that's also coming out right at this time, coming up on the year anniversary of the Black Knight Decoded again. So on November 18th is going to be the anniversary of that, landing right at this time, and they've been preparing the world for the alien deception, their disciples, letting them know that it's staged and their perspective of it. And you could see the same reminders coming up again at this time, because they know the year cycle, the year of preparation and purification that goes with the warnings. There's going to be the warning cry when you hear them say peace and safety. There's going to be a time gap, and then sudden destruction's coming. They know a 1 year mark is the next time that it would come up again, which is where we are right at this threshold time. And they know we're running out of time, and as soon as we hit that mark, it is expected that somewhere right at that is when sudden destruction is going to start. Now, I found it very interesting in reflection that the Black Knight Decoded made mention that the message they were decoding was Sumerian in origin. Very interesting, considering that we've been looking at the celestial signs and understanding the time by looking at the Sumerian, Chaldean, Babylonian perspective. They do know what time it is. They do know what the proper perspective is. They do know more than we do, but we know enough to bring us right to the door. And it should also catch your attention that they played heavily on Times Square in connection with the piece too as well, but how they broadcast the message of the alien entity coming, they broadcast the message at Times Square in their little video. Which, when we look at our timeline, what major events have just recently happened at Times Square? Trump winning the election, supposedly. There was a major message that went out at Times Square, and there's still a message there at Times Square right now. The beginning of the end displays right there at Times Square now. They are sending out their message. They know the Great Deception's about to come. They know the sudden destruction's about to come. The beginning of the end is the name of the art display, and what message is pushed in the Black Knight Decoded. This is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. The beginning of the end. The party at the end of the world, at the beginning of everything, the end is near. They know exactly what time it is. There is a lot we don't know, but what we do know has brought us right to this time, and so we can rest the details further in God's hands. We will try to do research on it, but we will go forward in faith. And we see that time is very limited, just the hours ahead of us. There are expectations of major prophetic events. And then even in the days ahead, even more prophetic events as well. I am reminded of Luke 24, the road to Emmaus again, constantly, and just reminded of the two disciples' attitude toward reaching a certain milestone. They came to the limits of their understanding, but they were so close to giving up because they didn't keep going forward in faith. They didn't stay where they were supposed to stay. They didn't wait to learn more. And it's interesting to see when Jesus came alongside them and was talking with them. In verse 21, they were talking about, "And we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And besides all this, today is the third day since these things were done." They came to the limit of their understanding. They said, well, see, today's the day, and, he's not here. We think this isn't true, everything that we're told. The day's here, and nothing's happened. They came to the limit of their understanding. And what did Jesus do? He was standing right there. Did he say, well, today's the third day. I'm here. I rose from the dead. Surprise! No, he did not say that. Why? Because that was not the most important thing that they needed to focus on. And we need to take this as a lesson too. We should not get focused on dates necessarily, because we do not know the day or hour, but we are told to watch. But we should always keep in mind that there will always be things we do not understand, even when we come to the end of our journey, just like the wise men. We can go a long way and come to the very end of our journey and still be missing some very important things. That does not change what we've been told. That does not change what we've seen. We continue to go forward, and we continue to seek him for wisdom. Verse 25, Christ responds to him, "Then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself." And beginning at Moses. He went back to the beginning. The Alpha and Omega went back to the beginning of Scripture. And he rehearsed for them what Scripture had said, and brought their understanding up to where they were. The same for us. We rehearse the beginning. We do not know the end. We will not know the end because it hasn't happened yet. We will always start at the beginning and come up to where we are now. Just like the disciples, they were brought up to where they were. They weren't told the future at that time. Likewise for us. As we go forward, we rehearse things from the beginning of what we've been shown, what Scripture has been spoken, knowing that we will never know the whole picture, not up until the end. We won't know to the end. We will know from the beginning to where we are right now. And we will go forward in faith, believing all that the prophets have spoken. We are at an amazing time, and it reminds me of when the Hebrews left Egypt. And God worked a lot of events leading up to that made the people realize that they were going to leave Egypt. Their freedom was on the horizon, and most of the plagues on Israel did not affect them, except for the very last one. But there was a buildup of anticipation that they were going to be leaving Egypt. They knew their life was going to be changing. They knew the promises too as well, back to their fathers, with Jacob and Joseph, of how long the people would be there before they would go out of Egypt. They had an understanding of prophecy, of that they would be free, and they saw events leading up to their freedom. And they had a working disassociating them and separating them from their comfortable world. Yes, they were slaves there. But as they complained about later, they thought they had it pretty good as slaves. But God was using events to wake them up that they were getting ready to leave. The same is true for us. We know from prophecy that we are getting ready to leave. We don't know the exact day that the call to come up hither is going to go out. But we see God working in time and prophecy and geopolitical events, working things together. We know we're at the threshold. We know we're at a time. We have expectation. We have our loins girt about. We have our coats on. We have our staff in our hand. We are ready to go. And we are separating our heart right now from our old way of life because we are strangers and pilgrims here. We are expecting a second Exodus when we will leave this world. When we see events coming together in the world and in prophecy, we should be preparing our heart to leave, setting our affection on things above. looking up, looking unto eternity, looking unto our Redeemer and our Beloved, getting our eyes off this world. And this was Lot's wife's problem. See, they had several hours warning in advance that judgment was coming. They even had the event with people trying to break their door down and get into their house. And that should have woken Lot's wife up that these people are not my friends. This is not my home. I don't live here. This is not where I should be living either. You know, the events that happened before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah happened, those events that happened before that should have woken Lot's wife up that she needed to be leaving, that she needed to be separating her heart, and that she needed to be start looking to move somewhere else. But it didn't, because she could not separate her heart from her world, from her lifestyle, from the way she was living there. Her eyes and her heart were captured by the Egypt she was living in, so to speak. And she did not even let warning events separate her heart from the world. And we are told to remember Lot's wife for a reason. When we see things going on in the world, things getting crazy in the world too as well, and prophetic events and things coming together, that should be a wake-up call to us to make us think and remember, this world is not my home. I'm a stranger and a pilgrim here. I need to be getting ready to leave. I need to be getting my life right and living in light of eternity. There's about to be an exodus. I should not be making myself comfortable here. I should be living in light of eternity. I should be living wisely. We have heard the midnight cry, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him, which means we need to rise up. We need to trim our lamps. There are things we need to trim off of our life. We need to cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. And we need to be preparing our heart and life, going out right now, going forward in faith, going to meet our bridegroom, living in light of eternity, and striving to be Christ-like. And just like the wise men, there's a lot that we won't know. Things that we would like to know, but we won't know. But we can look back on everything that we have seen and what the prophets have spoken. We can start at the beginning, and we can see what is being worked now and how we're brought to a time of expectation. We're brought to our Jerusalem. We have the expectation that our Bethlehem is right around here, and we have been looking up, for our redemption is drawing nigh. And so, like the wise virgins, we will trim our lamps, we will rise up, and we will go out to meet the bridegroom, expecting to meet him and serving him first and highest above all else. Maranatha.